My name is Emma Carter. I am 33 years old, and for most of my life, I believed family meant showing up when it mattered. I was wrong. The day my parents were buried, my older sister proved just how wrong I was. 6 days. That was all it took. 6 days after we buried Mom and Dad, I stood on the front porch of the farmhouse where I had lived my entire life. The house where I learned to walk. The house where Mom baked pies every Sunday. The house where Dad taught me how to balance a farm ledger before I was old enough to drive. And the lock wouldn't open. I tried again. Nothing. The key turned halfway and stopped. I stared at the shiny brass lock. It was new. Someone had changed it. Then the front door opened. My sister Vanessa stood there holding a coffee mug that used to belong to Mom. She looked completely comfortable. Like she owned the place. "You're back?" she asked. I blinked. "What happened to the lock?" "I changed it." She said it so casually. Like she was talking about changing a light bulb. "You changed the locks?" Vanessa took a sip of coffee. "Of course. This house belongs to me now." I stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "The house. The farm. The money. Everything." She smiled. "You should probably finish packing tonight." My stomach tightened. "Packing? I want you out by morning." For a moment I couldn't speak. Mom and Dad had been dead less than a week. Their graves hadn't even settled. And Vanessa was already trying to throw me out. What she didn't know was that my parents had planned for this. Every bit of it. And before the week was over, everything she believed would come crashing down. The Carter family farm sat on 250 acres in western Virginia. There were apple orchards stretching toward the mountains. Cattle grazed in wide green fields. A creek wound through the back pasture. 3 generations of our family had worked that land. My grandfather started with almost nothing. My father, Robert Carter, turned it into a successful business. My mother, Susan Carter, managed every dollar. She could balance books better than most accountants. When her arthritis got worse, she taught me everything she knew. I studied accounting in college. Then I came home. While my friends moved to cities and chased careers, I returned to the farm. I never regretted it. For 10 years I managed the finances. Every apple sold. Every cow purchased. Every bill paid. Every contract signed. I knew that farm better than anyone. Especially better than my sister. Vanessa was 5 years older than me. The day she turned 18, she left. She threw her bags into her boyfriend's truck and announced she was never coming back. "I'm not wasting my life on a farm," she told Mom. Mom didn't argue. She just quietly watched her leave. Vanessa moved to the city. She bounced from one dream to another. Fashion school. Then a business idea. Then another job. Then another relationship. Nothing lasted. But one thing never changed. Whenever she needed money, she called home. $500. $2,000. $5,000. My parents always helped. One day I asked Dad why. "Because she's still my daughter," he said softly. "Even when she forgets she's part of this family." Everything changed on a cold Tuesday afternoon. I was finishing monthly reports when the phone rang. Not my cell phone. The old kitchen phone. The one nobody used anymore. I almost ignored it. Thank God I didn't. The caller was a state trooper. At first I couldn't understand what he was saying. The words didn't seem real. Dad had been driving home from the farmer's market. A deer ran into the road. He swerved. The truck hit a guardrail. Then it rolled down an embankment. Dad died instantly. Mom survived for 4 hours. I drove to the hospital as fast as I could. She never woke up. I sat beside her bed holding her hand until the machines went silent. Then I walked outside into the cold parking lot. And I called Vanessa. It was after 2 in the morning. Her phone rang 6 times. Finally she answered. The first thing she said was not hello. It wasn't are mom and dad okay? It wasn't what happened? It was one question. Did they have life insurance? I closed my eyes. I couldn't believe it. I told her they were gone. There was silence. 3 seconds. Then she asked about the house. I handled everything alone. The funeral. The flowers. The obituary. The church arrangements. The farm business. The suppliers. The workers. Everything. Because grief doesn't stop cattle from needing food. The farm still had to run. Vanessa promised she was coming immediately. She arrived 3 days later. And she didn't come alone. She brought her ex-husband, Jason. The same man she divorced years ago. The moment they stepped out of the rental car, I knew something was wrong. Neither of them looked sad. Neither of them looked heartbroken. They looked interested. Like investors arriving to inspect property. Vanessa walked through the front door and slowly looked around. This place hasn't changed, she said. Jason was already walking toward the barn. Looking around. Studying the property. Checking his phone. Measuring distances. Calculating. It felt wrong. Everything about it felt wrong. An hour later Vanessa found me in Dad's office. She had already gone through filing cabinets. Where's the paperwork? She asked. What paperwork? The deed. Bank accounts. The will. The lawyer has it. She frowned. When do we read it? Next week. Vanessa crossed her arms. I already talked to an attorney. I looked at her. You did what? He says I'm the oldest child. Everything should go to me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom and Dad had been gone for only days. And she was already fighting over money. Jason walked into the room. How much land is it again? 250 acres. His eyes widened. He whistled. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't grief. This was greed. The funeral took place that Saturday. The church was packed. People came from 3 counties. My parents had spent 40 years helping others. Everyone wanted to say goodbye. I stood at the front and read the eulogy. I talked about Dad teaching me to drive a tractor. I talked about Mom's colorful accounting books. I talked about family. About hard work. About kindness. My voice shook, but I finished. Vanessa sat in the front row. Silent. She never shared a memory. Never told a story. Never stood up. Her phone buzzed twice during the service. She didn't even silence it. Jason spent most of the service staring at the ceiling. Afterward people lined up to hug me. One of Mom's closest friends, Martha Bennett, held my hands tightly. She looked into my eyes. Your mother prepared for everything, sweetheart. I frowned. What do you mean? Martha hesitated. Then she simply smiled. You'll see. At the time, I didn't understand. Later, I would. The morning after the funeral, Vanessa called me into the living room. She was sitting in Dad's favorite chair. Jason stood behind her. Like a bodyguard. Vanessa placed several papers on the coffee table. Property records. Legal documents. Printouts from websites. I've done my research, she announced. I looked through them. None of them mattered. None of them mentioned my parents' actual will. Yet Vanessa acted completely confident. As the oldest child, she said, everything belongs to me. I stared at her. Have you even seen the will? I don't need to. Then she leaned forward. and said something I would never forget. "You were never really family, Emma." My chest tightened. She continued. "You were the hired help." The hired help. I had spent 10 years working beside Mom and Dad. I held Mom's hand while she died. I kept the farm running. And somehow I was the hired help. I looked at her calmly. "Then let's wait for the lawyer." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "There is nothing to wait for." I walked away before I said something I would regret. As I entered the kitchen, I heard her making a phone call. To a locksmith. The next morning my key stopped working. The locks had been changed. Just like she'd planned. Vanessa opened the door wearing Mom's bathrobe. Holding Mom's coffee mug. She looked completely at home. "Oh," she said. "You're still here?" I couldn't believe her. "I've lived here my entire life." "You lived here," she corrected. Past tense. Then she smiled. "It's my house now." I didn't argue. There was no point. Instead, I walked upstairs. Packed 2 suitcases. My clothes. My laptop. 10 years of accounting records. Several binders. And a framed photo of Mom and Dad. Vanessa watched from the hallway. She never offered help. Never apologized. Never even looked guilty. I carried everything across the yard. To the small apartment above the equipment shed. The place seasonal workers used during harvest season. 1 room. 1 tiny bathroom. 1 small window facing the orchard. That was my new home. At least for now. As night fell, I looked toward the farmhouse. Lights glowed in every room. Music blasted through open windows. Vanessa and Jason were celebrating. Celebrating before the will had even been read. Then I heard something that made my stomach drop. Jason was talking on the phone. "Call the realtor," Vanessa said loudly. "I want the property listed by Friday." They were planning to sell everything. The farm. The orchards. The land my family had spent generations building. And they hadn't even seen the will. The next morning I called our lawyer, Mr. Thompson. "When is the official reading?" I asked. "Tuesday." His voice sounded calm. Almost too calm. Then he added something strange. "Make sure you're there, Emma." "I will." "And bring your records." "My records?" "All of them." He paused. "Trust me." Then he hung up. I stared at the phone. Something felt different. Something he wasn't saying. For the next 4 days I waited. Vanessa fired workers. She tried canceling contracts. She spread stories around town. She told people I manipulated my parents. She claimed I was stealing her inheritance. The rumors spread quickly. Some people believed them. Others didn't. I stayed quiet. I kept feeding cattle. Managing accounts. Checking equipment. Running the farm. Because someone had to. But every night I wondered the same thing. Why did Mom's friends say everything was prepared? Why did the lawyer keep telling me to wait? And why did it feel like my parents knew exactly what Vanessa would do? Then, the night before the reading, I found something hidden beneath my bed in the barn apartment. A dusty box. Inside was a letter. Written in Mom's handwriting. My hand shook as I opened it. The note was short. Very short. But it changed everything. "Emma. If you're reading this, your father and I were right. Vanessa will try to take everything. Don't fight her with words. Let the paperwork speak. Mr. Thompson has everything. Trust him. And trust what you've built. Love. Mom." I read the letter again. And again. And again. Mom knew. She had known all along. The question was, what exactly had she and Dad planned? And what was waiting for us at the lawyer's office on Tuesday morning? Tuesday morning arrived faster than I expected. I barely slept the night before. Mom's letter stayed folded inside my shirt pocket. Every time I touched it, I felt a little stronger. If Mom had trusted the lawyer, then I would too. Before sunrise, I finished my usual chores. I fed the cattle. Checked the water troughs. Inspected the cold storage building. The routine helped calm my nerves. Animals didn't care about inheritance fights. They just needed food and care. And that felt honest. Unlike everything else happening around me. When I finished, I went back to the apartment and got dressed. Nothing fancy. A clean shirt. Dark pants. Comfortable shoes. Professional. The same way I dressed for bank meetings and business appointments. Across the yard, I saw Vanessa and Jason loading bags into their rental car. Vanessa wore an expensive black dress. Jason wore a sport coat. They looked like people arriving to collect a prize. They looked confident. Like they had already won. I wondered how long that confidence would last. The lawyer's office sat above a hardware store on Main Street. The building was old. The stairs creaked under every step. When I reached the conference room, several people were already there. Martha Bennett sat quietly at one side of the table. Beside her sat Karen Hayes, manager of the local agricultural cooperative. Both women smiled when they saw me. Mr. Thompson stood at the front of the room. A thick stack of papers rested beside him. Much thicker than I expected. A few minutes later Vanessa and Jason arrived. Vanessa stopped when she saw Martha and Karen. "Why are they here?" she asked. Mr. Thompson looked up. "They are involved in the estate." Vanessa frowned. Jason shrugged. Neither of them looked worried. Yet. A few moments later Pastor Williams entered and took a seat near the door. The room became quiet. Everyone waited. Finally Mr. Thompson opened his briefcase. "Thank you all for coming." Vanessa crossed her legs confidently. Jason leaned back in his chair. Mr. Thompson adjusted his glasses. Then he said something nobody expected. "There are two parts to Robert and Susan Carter's estate plan." The room froze. "Two parts?" Vanessa looked confused. She clearly hadn't known that. Neither had I. Mr. Thompson continued. "We will begin with part 1. He opened the first document. Then he started reading. His voice was calm and steady. "To our daughter, Vanessa Carter Mitchell, we leave the family residence located at 1847, Orchard Road, including all furnishings and personal property within the home." Vanessa smiled immediately. Jason grinned. They exchanged a look. A look that said, "See? We were right." Mr. Thompson continued reading. "We also leave Vanessa Carter Mitchell the sum of $280,000 from our savings account." Vanessa's smile grew wider. Jason squeezed her hand. Pastor Williams nodded. For a second, it looked like everything Vanessa wanted was coming true. Then Mr. Thompson read the next sentence. "This inheritance is conditional." The smile disappeared. Vanessa blinked. "Conditional?" Mr. Thompson nodded. "The house must be occupied and maintained by Vanessa Carter Mitchell for a minimum of 5 consecutive years." Vanessa sat upright. "What? If the condition is not met, ownership of the property returns to the Carter family trust." The room became quiet. Very quiet. Vanessa looked stunned. 5 years? Mr. Thompson nodded. "Yes. I can't stay here for 5 years." Jason leaned toward her. "We'll figure it out later." But I could see the concern on his face. The house wasn't what they wanted. The land was. The millions were. And none of that had been mentioned yet. Vanessa looked directly at Mr. Thompson. "Where's everything else?" "The rest is addressed in part 2. The room became silent again. Part 2. Whatever was inside that second document mattered. A lot. Mr. Thompson reached into his briefcase. Then he removed a sealed envelope. The paper looked older. More official. More important. He broke the seal. The sound seemed loud inside the room. Everyone watched. Nobody spoke. Then he began reading. 7 years ago, Robert and Susan Carter established the Carter Family Irrevocable Trust. Vanessa frowned. Jason sat up straighter. Mr. Thompson continued. The trust contains the following assets. He started listing them. The farm. The orchards. The equipment. The mineral rights. The cooperative shares. The education fund. Everything. Every major asset my parents owned. Then he looked up. The current estimated value of trust assets is approximately $27,500,000. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. $27.5 million. Not in the will. In the trust. A trust created 7 years earlier. Vanessa's face turned white. Jason looked like he had been punched. I sat completely still. Mom knew. She had known exactly what would happen. Vanessa finally found her voice. 27 million? Mr. Thompson nodded. Approximately. Jason leaned forward. Who's in charge of the trust? Vanessa immediately answered. Obviously me. Mr. Thompson looked at her. No. The single word hit harder than a shout. Vanessa stared. What do you mean no? The trust contains specific requirements. He turned another page. Then he began reading. The trustee must have lived on the Carter farm continuously for at least 5 years before the death of the grantors. Vanessa's eyes widened. She hadn't lived there in 20 years. Mr. Thompson continued. The trustee must have maintained verifiable financial records for farm operations. Another requirement she couldn't meet. And the trustee must have actively participated in the local agricultural community. Strike 3. Vanessa qualified for none of them. Not one. The room stayed silent. Everyone understood what was happening. Even before the next name was read. This is ridiculous. Vanessa shouted. Jason stood up. This was designed to exclude her. Mr. Thompson remained calm. Your parents created these conditions. Jason's face reddened. We'll challenge it. You may try. Mr. Thompson folded his hands. The trust is legally protected. Then he looked toward Martha and Karen. Both witnesses are present today. Suddenly everything made sense. Martha. Karen. They hadn't come to watch. They had been there when my parents signed the trust 7 years ago. They had known all along. Vanessa stared at them in disbelief. You knew? Martha nodded slowly. Your parents thought very carefully about this. Karen spoke next. They wanted the farm protected. Vanessa slammed both hands onto the table. This is a setup. Nobody answered. Because deep down, everyone knew the truth. My parents hadn't set up Vanessa. They had prepared for her. There was a difference. Mr. Thompson turned another page. The designated trustee of the Carter Family Irrevocable Trust is Emma Carter. Silence. Complete silence. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. Vanessa looked at me. Then at the document. Then back at me. No. Her voice sounded small. No. Mr. Thompson nodded. Your parents named Emma specifically. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. Not because of the money. Because of what it meant. For years I wondered if Mom and Dad noticed. If they saw the sacrifices. The late nights. The hard work. The responsibilities. Now I had my answer. They had seen everything. Mr. Thompson continued reading. The trust wasn't a gift. It was a responsibility. I had to continue operating the farm, support the community, manage scholarships for local students, protect the land, preserve the family legacy. My parents hadn't handed me millions. They had handed me a mission. And I understood why. Because I had already been doing it for 10 years. Then Mr. Thompson read one final clause. If the trustee fails to meet these obligations, trust assets transfer to a community foundation. Jason's head snapped up. Vanessa stared. The meaning was obvious. Even if I failed someday, Vanessa would never inherit the trust. Never. My parents had made absolutely sure of that. Vanessa exploded. You manipulated them. She pointed at me. You poisoned them against me. I remained seated. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Martha spoke first. Your parents visited my home every week. Karen followed. Emma has managed the farm honestly for 10 years. Neither woman sounded angry. They sounded certain. Because facts don't need yelling. Vanessa looked around the room. Nobody was supporting her. Not even Pastor Williams. He looked miserable. Like he suddenly realized he had chosen the wrong side. Then Mr. Thompson said something unexpected. There is one final document. Everyone froze. Another document? Mr. Thompson unfolded a letter. This is a personal message from Robert and Susan Carter. The room became completely still. Even Vanessa stopped talking. Mom and Dad had one last thing to say. And everyone listened. To our daughters. We love you both equally. My throat tightened. Mr. Thompson continued. Vanessa, we gave you freedom. We supported your dreams. We helped whenever you needed us. Vanessa stared at the table. Emma, we gave you roots. We watched you choose this farm every day. My eyes filled with tears. The letter continued. Vanessa, the house is not a punishment. It is an invitation. Come home. Learn what your family built. Tears rolled down Martha's cheeks. Karen wiped her eyes. Even Jason looked uncomfortable. Then came the part that broke me. Emma, the trust is not a reward. It is a responsibility. We know you can carry it because you already have. I looked down. Mom and Dad were finally saying what they had never said aloud. Not because they didn't love Vanessa. But because the truth would have hurt her. Now the truth was written permanently on paper. And nobody could argue with it. When the letter ended, silence filled the room. Then Vanessa snapped. This isn't fair. She swept papers off the table. They chose her. Nobody answered. Because they had. Not because I was the favorite. Because I stayed. Because I worked. Because I cared. Because I showed up. Jason grabbed her arm. We need to leave. Vanessa shook him off. Then she pointed directly at me. You stole everything. For the first time all morning, I stood. I looked directly into her eyes. Then I said quietly. The hired help kept the books. The room went silent. Vanessa remembered. Those were her own words. The hired help. Now those words had come back to her. And she had no answer. None at all. Mr. Thompson finally ended the meeting. Vanessa stormed toward the door. Jason followed. Before leaving, she turned around one last time. This isn't over. Then she disappeared. The door slammed shut. And for the first time all week, I could breathe. Pastor Williams slowly stood. His face looked exhausted. I owe you an apology, Emma. I nodded. He had believed Vanessa. He had pressured me. But I could see genuine regret in his eyes. You were afraid, I said quietly. He lowered his head. Then he left. The room felt lighter afterward. Martha hugged me tightly. Your mother knew exactly who you were. Karen shook my hand. The farm is safe. Mr. Thompson smiled. Your parents trusted the right person. For the first time since the accident, I felt something other than grief. I felt peace. 3 months later, everything had changed. Vanessa lasted only 2 weeks in the farmhouse. Then she left. The reality of maintaining a farm was harder than she expected. Bills. Repairs. Responsibility. She returned to the city. Without saying goodbye. Jason had bigger problems. Authorities began investigating the documents connected to the attempted land sale. The development deal disappeared. So did Jason. Pastor Williams stepped away from church leadership. A new pastor took over. Life slowly moved forward. The Education Fund awarded its first scholarships that spring. 3 local students received support for college. I signed the paperwork at Mom's kitchen table. The same table where she taught me accounting. The same table where Dad planned every planting season. And for the first time, the house felt like home again. Not because it belonged to me. Because it belonged to the future. One evening in March, my phone rang. Vanessa. I almost ignored it. Almost. Finally I answered. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I was. Instead she asked. Can I get more money from the trust? I closed my eyes. Nothing had changed. Not really. The trust isn't for us, I said. It's for the farm and the community. Silence. Then she sighed. This still isn't fair. I looked out across the fields. The cattle moved slowly through the pasture. The sun was setting behind the mountains. And suddenly I understood something. Fairness wasn't the issue. Choices were. Vanessa made hers. I made mine. Our parents simply recognized the difference. The door is still open, I told her. If you ever want to come home for the right reasons. She didn't answer. A moment later, the call ended. I placed my phone down and watched the sunset. The orchard stretched across the horizon. The farm looked exactly the way Dad loved it. Strong. Peaceful. Alive. My parents didn't leave me $27 million. They left me trust. Trust that I would protect what mattered. Trust that I would stay. Trust that I would keep showing up. And standing there on the porch, watching the last light fade over the land my family had built, I realized something important. The person who stays. The person who works when nobody is watching. The person who keeps going when everyone else leaves. That person is never the hired help. That person becomes the one everyone trusts. And that trust is worth more than any inheritance.